Hey guys, Poochie Snoo here, and I'm just going to be explaining the lore behind my most recent animation. This is definitely the most lore-heavy animation out of the recent videos I have made, and I definitely am very proud of this one. I think this is my most high-quality video in a long time, if maybe ever. But I understand that unless you have a pretty decent understanding of my story, you probably have zero idea what you're seeing or what's happening, so I'm going to break it down just so you can get the most out of this project. Because as far as I know, only a handful of people are very familiar with the story. So I'm going to start off by explaining a little bit of background information. This story takes place in the nearest future. Exactly how near is not specified. I think I want to leave that open to interpretation, how soon or far in the future you think this is. It takes place in a giant facility known as Robotics. There are two parts of this facility. There is the entertainment portion called Kingdom Quest, and it's basically like a bowling alley and an arcade with laser tag, only it probably doesn't have an arcade. It has bowling, probably putt-putt, laser tag, that type of stuff, and it's open to the public. So that's part of the part of the company where people and kids usually are found. This is where we find our main character. His name is Ginger. He's just a laser tag robot, and he's one of three. The rest of the building is quite vast and is not open to the public. It's actually kept under wraps. So there's a lot of employees in this place. There's a lot of rooms in this place. In fact, there's a lot of stories in this place that are not fully disclosed or even understood fully. A lot of the employees don't know each other. They're ranked according to the level of their division, and they even use Google Maps to get around sometimes, so it's a pretty huge place. The engineering portion of Wild Robotics is owned by the company owner and founder Cliff Wild. He's the head engineer. He designed the code that all of the robots run off of. And you're probably wondering, why do they build robots? Well, this is in the future when, unfortunately, or actually in my case, because I hate AI, very fortunately, a law was passed that banned generative AI in the business environment. And so presently in this story, it can only be used under very certain conditions. And currently, Wild Robotics specializes in building mascot-type robots. So these are usually used in colleges or entertainment centers, similar to Kingdom Quest, or maybe even present day's Chuck E. Cheese or bowling alleys. So that's normally where they're found, and Wild Robotics produces these and designs these by commission for these companies that can afford them. So robots aren't that widespread in this portion of the story. So they're still sparse enough that when people encounter them, they find them pretty cool and interesting. So now to jump into the story as it specifically applies to this video, and the general issues that my main characters are facing throughout the story that I've been developing. And I've been working on this for about 3 years. But this is a newer version of the story that I started in September. So you might note that a few of my old animations are actually not canon anymore. The story has completely changed, and I'm explaining the newest and most up-to-date version. The AI that Cliff developed for his company and for his robots is called Code AVEX. I actually considered the ethical questions that what makes our present day and existent AI so detestable. So I could kind of design Code AVEX to be a lot less ethically concerning. So in opposition to present day Gen AI, Code AVEX actually has no access to the internet. So the robots in this story are pre-programmed with knowledge, general knowledge that's acceptable up until their program age. So let's say the robot's programmed to be 19. It will know pretty much everything an average 19-year-old would know, but it cannot access the internet and pull anything at once. So everything that it says is based off a language model and also the robot's own understanding and learning, so they can pick up stuff pretty well. So actually, interestingly, this is the world's, at this point, very first sentient AI, and I can tell you that they're sentient as the writer of the story, but very unfortunately and interestingly, Cliff Wild himself does not believe that the robots in the code that he invented are sentient, and this calls some problems into question, especially with how he ends up treating them in the future. There's unfortunately no laws protecting AI. And what I mean by this is that the robots are capable of understanding, processing, learning, and thinking the way that humans do. Because when Cliff created it, he was working in close collaboration with his brother, Hanson, who worked in psychology. So this AI model is based off the human mental processes. So these robots are sentient, and there's nothing protecting how they can be treated as long as their application that they're used in does not interfere with the new AI ban laws. Now, Wild Robotics owns the exclusive rights to code AVEX, so no other companies can use this code, and it is the most advanced AI to exist in this time. So, interestingly, and as you can expect, there's a lot of people that would probably be after the code, and Cliff is actually really paranoid about this, so he's got a lot of anti-hacking parameters on these machines. So he's got a lot of protections up, a lot of data protection. He's even gotten to the point where data cannot be transferred from the robots, so if one of them gets serious damage to its computers, the data cannot be extracted. So these things, he's made some pretty costly measures to protect his AI. No one else in the company has access to it. He does all the computer work. Everyone else just does hardware work and servicing, so he does everything. He's put a lot of effort into keeping this very confidential. Because this is his life's work, and he collaborated with his brother on it when he created it, and the animation's a little bit out of order, but I'll give you a little background information on this clip here, back when Hanson and Cliff were still very young, and he's still very young at this point, but this is when they were late teens, early 20s, they received funding to create an amusement park. This was called WildWorld, and this was basically a collaboration between the engineer brother, and then the one that just enjoyed creating spaces for people to spend as a family. Hanson, Cliff's brother, really loved nature and wildlife, and this is a point in time where a lot of today's endangered species are going extinct, so they sort of created their own version of a zoo, but this used Cliff's robotics and animatronics knowledge to make it sort of an animatronic zoo / amusement park situation. This is about when Code AVEX was in its earliest forms. Cliff was the first to implement his AI into one of his robots. This was a tiger animatronic. Her name was Phoenix. She was used in a summer camp program. Unfortunately, there was an accident at WildWorld. The nature of this accident isn't fully understood, but there is assumed that there's no foul play. Hanson did unfortunately die in this accident, and Phoenix was present at the time of his death. She was not the cause of it, and this is provable because of her cameras and her security footage from the event. This is shortly after the AI ban, and the public opinion toward AI is very negative right after this ban, because most people were in support of it being banned. So they were very quick to blame Phoenix, even though it clearly wasn't her fault. They said she should have left and gone to find help, but the park was closed at this point, and Hanson was injured to the point that he was bleeding out very fast. Cliff figured out that she wanted to stay with him because she didn't want to leave him to die alone, but sentience and well-meaning and emotions cannot be provable and were generally doubted, so most people did not accept this explanation and believed that Phoenix was faulty. This was the reason for her not having gone and found help, and Cliff was actually supposed to decommission her. So that is the backstory behind this clip right here, is just Phoenix being present at the time of Cliff's death. And Phoenix is important to the story because she's sort of the embodiment of the mental depth that this AI is able to experience. Phoenix was also abandoned for 5 years and ended up committing suicide, so that's what this final scene is right here. And this situation is what led Cliff to finally believe that his robots were sentient. Flash forward 2 years in the future. This is the point where, after Hanson died, Cliff sold WildWorld and it's in a current state of dilapidation, but he used the funds to start Wild Robotics, the company where he does all his major operations. Everything was going fine up until there was a very strange incident. One of the robots was found in an unauthorized portion of the building. She did not directly belong to Wild Robotics. They had sold her years back, and she had been returned for routine service. So, she was in a really strange condition, and actually, she seemed to be displaying erratic behavior and attacked a few employees. No one was killed, but some of them were pretty injured, and this was very concerning to Cliff because these robots are supposed to have infallible safety parameters on them. After further examination, it was determined that this robot had been tampered with. The robot's name is Cherry. She's a little cheetah, and I've drawn her a few times and animated her, so you may have seen her before. Cherry ended up being detained for further study, but it was very crucial that this incident remain as classified as possible, because if word got out that Code AVEX was unstable, or it was possible for these robots to become dangerous, this could be really, really bad for the company. Cliff was really worried that someone was tampering with his robots, which shouldn't be possible, but someone had figured out how. It seemed that half of her code had actually been erased. So Cliff started to get an increasing paranoia that someone was after his company and trying to cause trouble. He does not fully understand the extent of this, but there is the possibility that this could happen again and other robots could be turned rogue. So Cliff decided that the best way to develop a defense against this was, unfortunately, because he couldn't share this with anyone, he couldn't hire extra security, and unfortunately these robots are very strong. They can actually cause a lot of damage if there's not any parameters governing what they do, and coupled with Cherry, who had completely lost her mind and had no sense of reality, she just wanted to basically attack people and kill them. So really not good to have happening in your company, especially when there's a lot of robots and there's a chance that they could even get mass hacked, which would be very terrible. So what Cliff did was he chose another one of his robots. It wasn't entirely at random. This one was he wasn't really that important of a character. No one would really look at him as, I guess, the ideal subject for this. This is Ginger. We mentioned him earlier. He's just one of the 3 laser tag robots. He's pretty chill. Has the personality sort of a camp counselor. But he does have character qualities that made Cliff think that this probably would be the best for his project. So what he did was he got Ginger, and without Ginger's consent or permission or any indication that he agreed to do this, completely weaponized Ginger. And so basically what I mean by that is he filled Ginger's framework with weaponry, and did not even tell him what he put in him. So Ginger's sort of a peaceful character, and so naturally the thought of being filled with guns and other weapons and not being told where they are or what exactly he has is a pretty terrifying concept. Ginger's defense systems also run off a separate computer program, so they are not controlled by his own consciousness. The system is supposed to kick in when it recognizes a significant threat against other robots or humanity, and Ginger's job is basically to terminate the robots that pose a threat. Which is unfortunate and terrifying because this could literally happen to his own friends. His own friends could get hacked and he would have to kill them. And he, again, has given absolutely no consent to this role. It was wholly decided by Cliff, and because he is a robot and bound by his understanding of his worth, he is required to do whatever his creator says. As one can imagine, this use of robotics is not legal at all, so Cliff has to be very secret about what he's done with Ginger. Ginger's not allowed to talk about his weapons, so that's sort of what's going on. It's really unfortunate because Ginger feels like he's losing connections with his actual friends. He's handling a lot of stress and problems that he has to keep to himself, and he can't explain them, so he's starting to lose his friendships, and it's really hard for him. Things go from bad to worse when there's a bit of an accident. His best friend Serafina, I've shown her a few times before, is another one of the laser tag robots. She's Team Gold. They're pretty chill. They're like best friends, basically. There was an accident where Ginger, he has explosive in his framework. They went off, and this was originally thought to be an accident. Serafina was concussed. She ended up being okay, but Ginger was still very worried for her and very afraid that he could hurt her again, so he ended up pulling away from her, and she basically thought that her friend was abandoning her for no reason, even though she wholly forgave him and considered it all to have been a really unfortunate accident. This is later figured out that Ginger's explosives going off were not an accident, and I'm going to break into that a little bit later. The following 2 months, which is this scene right here, basically just shows Ginger had some functionality issues following getting blown up because he wasn't fixed properly, so he had to hide a lot of the pain he was going through too, which is pretty difficult because now he's dealing with both mental and physical stress and pain that he has to keep secret. So it's pretty taxing on his mentality here. And then we're going to go into why Cherry getting hacked and why Ginger's explosives going off is significant. They do figure out that there is someone in the company actively trying to jeopardize it, and they've only ever seen him on recordings and other clips. He may be just trying to strike terror in Cliff because he is intentionally after Cliff. And the reasons why I can't share because I'm not going to fully disclose the whole story. I do want to leave a little bit of mystery and interest out there in case I end up writing this as a book or doing something else with it, which I do plan to do. I'm just not really sure how to go about that yet at this time. So anyway, this guy, his identity is completely unknown, but he does have a persona that he characterizes himself as. He wears an LED mask with a distinct symbol on it, and a black cloak, and he lives in an undetermined portion of the building. Because like I said, it's a huge building, there's lots of labs that are abandoned, equipment that are abandoned, stories underground, it's just a huge maze. And he's somewhere in there. He goes by the persona he's called the machine sadist. And the reason why is because he does dismantle the robots that he finds. There's a lot of spare ones, there's ones kept in storage that he can get his hands on, and has done some interesting things to create what he has called his own code. It's a virus, and he calls it Viper. So this is his own code that he's going to be using to inject inside of Wild Robotics and tear the company down, basically. And all of this is a goal to get back at Cliff for something. So it's kind of a revenge story. So what happens initially is he invented this code, but he wanted to put it inside one of the robots. It's able to exist in computers, but it needs a corporeal form. And he is he's a hacker and not an engineer, so naturally he doesn't have the expertise to build one of these robots on his own. But as a company insider, he does have access to all this equipment. He ended up using 2 other robots in the story to implant the virus onto. But this was not the first attempt. In fact, he had attempted this many times before, and it had always failed. The closest he got to implanting this virus onto one of the robot's computers was with Cherry. But unfortunately, the parameters kicked in and her code started self-terminating when it noticed that she was being tampered with. He unplugged her, and she managed to retain half of her code, but she escaped. With only half of her code, had no sense of herself or reality, and was very dangerous at that point. So that is where Cherry came from, and eventually they do figure out that this guy is planning to strike again, and this time he has successfully implanted Viper onto one of the robots. So Viper itself is not the robot, it is basically the demon possessing the robot, and the robot has base code from 2 other machines on there, so she's got 3 personalities, and that's why I call Viper the 3rd personality, because it is the overlording mentality in this machine. And basically Viper is able to manipulate other robots because she is able to access their telecommunication systems. That's what this scene is here. She basically posed as a victim to the machine sadist and lured Ginger to that location, so she sort of she's a mind manipulator. The entire concept of this story's villain is very, very new, so it's not wholly developed, but I think I do have a pretty solid concept, and I'm going to be exploring that over my next few animations and videos. I know I didn't wholly explain the plot, but like I said, this is still a work in progress, and I have a lot of it up in the air still, but I do want to give you enough context to fully appreciate my animated video, and you can have a sneak peek at my next project. Hopefully this will get released soon. I'm really looking forward to it. Thank you!